17 is called Still Going Wrong. Hiccup hadn't been the only one who had fought out of his skin. Stoic the Mask was once one of the finest sword fighters in the archipelago, feared from east for west for his extraordinary skill with the sword. He was a bit past it, of course, but now, being released from the witch's cupboard, had given Stoic a rush of blood to the head, and he fought as if he were young again. "The old stag has still got it, eh, Gobber?" yelled Stoic with the joyous light of battle in his eye, swishing his sword exultantly as he swooped down on Bolhart to high-five the hand of his old battle companion after another incredible victory. "Ha! Stoic the unbeatable, Stoic the invincible. These up-and-coming young shrimps can't beat the experience of an old war-walrus like me." So, red in the face, swelled up with pride at his victories. A close wrong friend with that elven guy. What a cheat the fella is. Stoic stood before Hiccup. When his very own son was set before him, Stoic's eyes had filled with tears. This was too much. He had dreamt of this moment oh so many times. Stoic bellowed out the hooligan hurrah, echoed by all the hooligans in the stadium. Reluctantly, the other tribes joined in. They had to admit it was the hooligans' moment. "Back in the saddle again, he's back in the saddle again. King of the Wild West." Stoic could not believe it. He, Stoic the Fast, was going to be king of the Wild West. Hiccup stood there quietly looking up at his father. He thought of one of old Wrinkly's sayings. Sometimes you have to stand up for what you believe in, even against those you love, and that can be harder than you think. He had never dreamed it would be this hard. "Father," said Hiccup wistfully, "if you were king, will you free the dragons?" There was such a hubbub of noise going on that at first Stoic did not hear the question, so Hiccup had to repeat it. Stoic still had a half smile on his face. "Son," he said kindly, "the dragons can never be freed. We need them to hunt for us, to carry us into battle. The rebellion must be put down strongly and firmly. The rogue dragons must be taught a lesson they can never forget. It is too dangerous to free the dragons. You will understand this when you are older." "No, I won't," thought Hiccup. "I am older, and I still don't understand." That wasn't all. Stoic didn't allow human state slaves on work, but he didn't stand up to the ugly thugs or the murderers or those tribes that did practice slavery. He just stood by and let it happen. And nothing that Hiccup said was ever going to change that. That's the moment when Hiccup realises he's going to have to try and beat his own father. "Prepare for battle!" screeched the eldest elder. "Make our salute to Thor!" Hiccup and Stoic held up their swords and pledged loyalty to the great god, and the battle began. Most Viking fathers and sons would have practised fighting each other on many previous occasions, but Stoic was the chief of his tribe and a busy man. He had never fought his son before, so he began the fight, puffed up with pride at his son's achievement in getting this far, but absolutely certain that he, Stoic, was going to win. Why wouldn't he be certain? His son, Hiccup, was only 13 years old. He had shot up in height recently, but he was still... Oh, by the way, there's a small footnote there. In fact, Hiccup had been born on the 29th of February of a leap year, so strictly speaking, he was still only 3 1/4. But he had shot up in height recently, but he was still kind of on the stringy side. He wasn't particularly bloodthirsty or competitive. And why would he want to beat his own father, whom he loved and respected? Of course, Stoic thought he was going to win. It had never occurred to Stoic the reason that Hiccup was standing in front of him in the first place was that quietly, patiently, methodically, his gangly, weird little son had become outstandingly good at sword fighting. Sword fighting was the only thing on the pirate training programme that Hiccup had ever been any good at. Hiccup was the kind of kid who practised. So for hours and hours he'd practised quietly watching others fight, taking tips from heroes like Humongously Hotshot and fighting against Kamikaze. He had read up about it. He knew Flashburn's sword fighting manual back to front and inside out. He was highly intelligent, so he could work out his opponent's weaknesses, and he didn't lose his head to temper or showing off. And those vital inches that he'd shot up recently meant that he had finally had the reach in his sword arm to fight and beat fully grown adults. Hiccup himself hadn't realised this until this very moment. Growing up happens so quick sometimes that it catches us by surprise. So 5 minutes into the fight, Stoic was very surprised indeed. To start off with, it was a pleased surprise. Stoic was a show-offy kind of fighter, and he was in a wildly confident mood. He was fighting with a Stormblade too, for he'd won that off Alva, and the Stormblade put heart into all who wielded it. So he threw his most extravagant fancy lunges to the roaring approval of the crowd. And then it was a more puzzled surprise as Hiccup parried every single one of those lunges and threw in a few of his own, one of which nearly got through Stoic's amazed guard. And then amazement turned to growing fury. Sturrock was a warrior, one of the finest of his age, and a Viking gets angry when he is being matched in a fight. He forgot he fought his son. The blood rage descended, his face turned red and recognisable with the red frenzy of battle. All thought deserted him as, yelling like a thwarted bear, he laid great swinging blows, a tremendous ferocity and power about him, to the left and right, back and forth. There are many phases in a battle. Even though the stakes were high, this has started lightly, almost like a pay-play fight. One of the fighters was certain he would triumph, and the other was unwilling to believe that he could ever win. But now the battle was in earnest, like a fire that suddenly caught, blazed higher than the treetops and destroyed all before it. Accidents can happen when the blood rage descends. In that long-lost world where knives and swords were toys and playthings, accidents could happen. Friends can destroy friends, relatives can hurt relatives in the furious heat of the temper-rash moment. The witch had slithered up behind Fishlegs. He turned and saw her standing not a few feet away, eyes alight with greedy malevolence. History repeats itself, hissed the witch. Father against son, son against father, just like it was before. The game is not over. I shall win it in the end. Hiccup the third. I knew I saw death in the mice guts, and death it shall be, as sure as I am Excelenor, and Excelenor is me. Of course, Sturrock was not the dread lord that Grimbeard had ever been. Sturrock would never intentionally harm a hair on his son's head. But accidents can happen when the blood rage descends. Sturrock raged around Hiccup like an almighty, unstoppable storm. Hiccup was the still point, moving only to deflect each blow, letting the storm rage around him and absorbing Sturrock's energy like a cliff absorbs the sea. It took some time again for Sturrock's puzzlement to turn to uneasiness to give way to the beginnings of anxiety. He redoubles his efforts, shot forward with a hangman's pass, followed by the glancing flick, charging bull-like with the plunge for glory. All were met by the bite-clean blade of Hiccup's sword. Was it Sturrock's imagination? Was his timing just a second or so slower, his reflexes very slightly dulled, his strength fading fast in the dying afternoon? A battle has many phases. 10 matches in a row is a lot even for a great hero, especially one who has spent the last 24 hours folded up inside a cupboard. Sturrock tried not to feel the creeping exhaustion, turning his sword arm numb and quivering. He tried to ignore the sweat in his eyes, the protest in his ageing legs, as the old black bones slammed down, jarring on the wooden platform, the magnificent belly that perhaps taken on a few too many beers and boars' heads in its time to keep it in the peak of physical fitness, groaning with the bruising strain and fierceness of the fight. Sturrock had always put a lot of effort into his fighting, and he was feeling it now, his shirt so drenched in sweat that it was as if he had bathed underwater, his lungs bursting, gasping, heaving for breath, his shoulders scrunched and torn in pain. His son was barely out of breath, his face expressionless. A hero never surrenders, thought Sturrock, fighting through the pain, and ow! Sturrock gasped as he pressed forward with another bruising, blistering attack, and a rip of agony in his knee sent him staggering like a toppling tree. The old stag, you see, has old war wounds. Long, long ago, when Sturrock was performing the quest to win Valderrama's hand, he'd injured his knee in a sword fight with a Larballout. You cannot fight time itself, slay the minutes and the hours with your blade, wipe the bleeding seconds on your shirt. Time cannot be fought. Sturrock tried to lunge again, but his leg would not support him. He listed to the left like a ship with a broken mast. End it, Hiccup, end it, pleaded Sturrock. Hiccup ended it. He stepped forward and quietly took the sword from his father's hand. Oh dear. I feel like crying now. Oh dear. There was absolute silence in the stadium. Look, time cannot be fought. That's such a sad picture. But Hiccup sort of had to do it, didn't he? Because, yeah, look at Hiccup's face there. You see, he didn't want to do it, but he sort of had to. Apart from Lard Tummy Lowort, who was so stupid that he did not realise what was going on, was still singing, "Back in the saddle again. He's back in the saddle again," on his own, until someone dug him in the ribs and got him to stop. Most Vikings looked away. There is nothing more painful than watching an old lion lose a fight, particularly to his own son. Hiccup's face was pure sickly white. "I'm sorry, father," whispered Hiccup. "I'm sorry." A few of the warriors hurried forward and swept him up to set him in front of the eldest elder. "The winner of the sword fighting competition, the champion of champions, is Hiccup Horrendous Haddock the Third," yelled the eldest elder. There was silence in the stadium. The crowd was finding this difficult to absorb. We'll have the next chapter.